Welcome to the GrowthPro Edge. We're here to help scale your business, build stronger teams, and sharpen your leadership skills. I'm your host, Denise Killian with the GrowthPro Group and Trainertainment. Today on the GrowthPro Edge, we're going to be talking about that entrepreneurial spirit and the lessons learned in starting a business, or in our guest's case, multiple businesses in different industries. What ingenuity that takes and how you keep on top of all of those businesses. Our guest is none other than Jim Lewis, who is an entrepreneur in his own right. He owns a nutrition health store. He owns real estate holdings, as well as a family entertainment center in Killeen, Texas, area 254. Jim Lewis, welcome to the GrowthPro Edge. I'm thrilled to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So we're going to talk about all things entrepreneurial. And you are someone that has always fascinated me because not only do you have that entrepreneurial spirit, but you have it in multiple businesses. So I want to get started. Tell us a little bit about the different businesses that you own and have started.
Okay. Well, they're kind of in multiple categories, right? So I have a real estate business, and in that business, we own an office building and a commercial building that was a grocery store at one time. Now it actually has an Aldi and an Urban Air in it, and also another retail center. So I have this commercial real estate business, and then in addition to that, I have a natural food store and a pharmacy business, and so that's retail. So it's a different kind of mindset and a different set of circumstances. And then beyond that, I have Area 254, which of course is in the family entertainment center space, which is how we met.
Yes, yes. And full disclosure, Jim, you and I worked together when you guys started up Area 254. Trainertainment came down and helped you guys do auditions to get everybody hired. And then we also did some sales training for your sales staff as you guys were just getting started opening up. So we do have a history of working together. And that's where I learned so much about you and your incredible ability to be laser focused on multiple things at the same time, which I think is a unique talent. So I want to start with which business of these three different industries, which one was first?
First was real estate. I bought my first house when I was 19 years old, but it was a rental property. And so I've been a real estate investor from then until now. It's just a matter of scale, right? But when I was in high school, I came across the idea of making real estate loans to people who were buying houses and flipping them. And so I had a free period, and I read a book on it. I listened to a seminar on cassette back then, and really kind of studied up on it and learned all I could about it, and then ultimately got into that business with the man who became my father-in-law and remained my father-in-law for 20 years actually. And but that was the first business, was real estate. And so I kind of thought of myself as a real estate investor to begin with.
So we have to pause for a second. 19, you bought your first house.
Mhm.
How?
Well, couple of thoughts on that. One is, when I was in that free period in class, I was looking at those tables that tell you if you invest a certain amount of money at a certain age and it gets a certain percentage return, then over time you'll be fabulously wealthy and all of those things. Well, those charts normally started with somebody who was around, say, 25. And I was looking at it, I was thinking, well, geez, I'm like 17 at the time. And I was thinking, wow, if I can start this much sooner, the math says I can stop that much sooner, or be that much better off, or whatever the case may be. So I started investing. I started just saving every bit of money that I could. Started investing in mortgages for people who are buying houses and flipping them and things like that, and then kind of parlayed that into a house, and eventually sold that house and did what's called a 1031 tax deferred exchange and bought two houses with that money, and then so it goes from there.
I love learning new things about someone that I've known for a minute, and I love learning this about you. And I can just see you in high school when everybody else is talking about the cars or the prom or the whatever, the football game, and you are just dialed in on how you can make your future better.
Well, I raced BMX bicycles when I was a kid, and you and I have talked about that. I got to travel all over the country doing that, and it was tremendous fun. I'm super fortunate that I got to do that. It did get me to a point though where I thought, I don't want to look back at my life and think that I peaked at 18 years old. you know. So what am I going to do next? How do I take you learn a lot doing something like that. You learn from winning, you learn from losing. Um, but just being in the game, competing and knowing that if you win this week, great, but next week there's another race. If you lose today, next week there's another race. Whatever you keep on going either way. There's so many lessons that I learned as a young person from all of that that I got to use throughout the whole rest of my life. But the investing side of it really kind of came from that idea that I don't want to look back and say this was the best I ever was. And then I also had this feeling inside me that it was like I don't want an average life. I know I can do better than that. And so I've always been willing to sacrifice on the front end, knowing that on the back end things would be so much better. And so that discipline has served me very well.
That's fantastic. Because yeah, most people don't think that way in high school. Heck, most 50-year-olds still aren't kind of thinking that way. So that just says so much about you and people who have, tons of people raced BMX bikes as kids, but didn't learn the lessons that you did and really internalize them and turn them into something.
Right. Yeah, that's true. For several years, I ran some Sam's clubs, and at one point in my life as well. And I remember coming across somebody who, when I first got hired, I worked with this person, and he kind of trained me on what was going on with Sam's Club. And then I went to another building, and ultimately came back a year later. Only when I came back, they asked me to run that building. And this guy was kind of scratching his head, going, "Well, I've been here 8 years. How come in a year you're running it?" And I said, "Well, did you do 1 year 8 times, or did you do 8 years?" You know, and it took him a minute to understand what I was saying, that he didn't grow. Whereas what I was doing was I went to the regional director as soon as I met him and said, "Hey, what has you the most frustrated right now?" And he told me, and I thought about it. I said, I think I can solve that for you. Can I have 3 guys to work with me? And and so we went and solved the problem, right? And then I came back. I'm like, all right, now what's on your mind? What's got you frustrated now? And kind of went from there. And it gave me a lot of exposure to a lot of different things that I wouldn't have had if I'd have just said, "Oh, hey, nice to meet you," and let him go about his way. And so um, I've always been bent that way, and I'm fortunate. It has served it has served me well. I don't think it makes me any better a person than anybody else. It's just I'm very fortunate that those things have worked out so well for me. Mhm.
Now, I think with any business, there's a bit of luck,
Mhm.
there's a bit of good fortune, things lining up the way that they're supposed to, and there's a whole lot of brain power and smart decisions, right?
Sure.
But
Sure.
sometimes it is a leap of faith too.
Right.
So, what would you say has been the biggest leap of faith moment you've had in your career, your professional life?
The biggest one. That's interesting. I know that there have been plenty of times in my career where I've been working on something and I realized somebody's going to have to make this decision, and that's me. Ultimately, I'm going to have to decide, and however this goes is how it goes, and that's me. And after you've done that enough times, of course, you feel very comfortable. You know you can live with the consequences of it one way or the other. And so I've kind of always looked at it and thought, if I get it wrong, I can always course correct. And unless I've killed myself, I mean, literally like fallen off a cliff and died, I'll be able to recover from this and come up with something else. But the biggest decision probably was we had a grocery store It was 52,000 square feet, and the tenant wanted me to cut their rent in half when their lease came up for renewal. And I said, that doesn't work for me. What are you going to do differently in your business? And he wasn't going to do anything different. He just wanted me to kind of subsidize his business until he decided to walk away from it. And so the biggest leap of faith I would say was I said, look, I'm not going to do that, but I'll buy your business from you. And so we agreed to a price for the business and all of the FF&E and everything. And I bought the business, and I hired somebody who had a lot of experience in the natural food space because I thought, you know what, this market doesn't really have a proper natural food store. It had a very small store, and that was it. And so we brought in more than 7,000 natural and organic items, and really kind of stabilized that grocery store. And but I would say that was definitely a turning point because it took me from real estate boy to retail. Even though I had some retail in the interim, that kind of gave me the confidence to do this. I had bought real estate. I went and worked at Sam's Club for a while. Costco asked me to join them and help them do a relocation of a building in Florida. So I did that before coming back to the real estate that we have here in Bryan College Station. And so um, but taking that leap was a big one because it meant taking on 85 employees. It meant taking on a business that had been there for a long time, but that had been suffering. But it did have good bones, though. It had good people. It had a good reputation. The store was old. I asked a guy who I knew who had designed like 40 different Whole Food stores. I said, what would it take to make this store look like what Whole Foods would do? And he said between 10 and 12 million dollars. And I said, oh, well, that isn't going to happen. So we're going to have to run with mom and pop chic here, country chic here, old store. And I don't have that kind of dough at the time. So there was no way that was going to happen. But anyway, you work with what you have, and you grow it. And thankfully that one worked out real well eventually, although even that business has evolved radically because it was in 52,000 square feet. At some point, I was evaluating it, and I realized that the pharmacy made money, that the natural foods was serving the community well, but that most of the store was kind of giving its life to the greater good of the thing. And so I eventually moved that to another building where I had an end cap available, and I put the whole thing into just 2,000 square feet. So from 52,000 to 2,000 square feet, and built a drive-through for the pharmacy. And in doing that, I cut the volume of the business in half, but also the staff count from 85 to 15, and of course reduced the overhead radically from 52 to 2. And so it took something that was very marginal to some and turned it into something that was very profitable. And so uh, sometimes you're faced with one problem and come up with multiple solutions along the way.
So it's interesting to me that you didn't set out to own a natural grocery chain or a grocery store. You didn't set out to own a pharmacy. You were doing real estate and you were scaling that.
Mhm.
And an opportunity came, and instead of saying, no, sorry, I'm not going to reduce your rent. This is what it is. You got to get out if you're not going to pay it and find another tenant. You looked at it in a different way and said, huh, maybe I could do that. Maybe I could take this on.
Yeah. Um, First of all, there's a saying I heard, and I don't know who said it, but it was that life is what happens while you're making other plans. So things happen along the way, right? Another example in the real estate building or business was we had a floor go empty on the third floor of an office building, and I kind of walked around it, and seemed like it was built out very well for executive suites, which are popular in big cities all around the world, but they weren't popular here in our town. And so there wasn't an operator to hire to go and lease the space to and have them run it. So I had to create that business, right? So I created this executive suites business on that floor, and then eventually sold it to Regis, which is the largest operator of that kind of business in the world. And so, it was kind of like solving a problem, right? Problem was I had a vacant floor. What am I going to do? And it seemed like the quickest way to fill it was to create a business and put it in it, and then and then run it. And so I did that. And then with the grocery store, it was kind of the same thing. The problem was I was going to have a big dark building. Solution is keep the business that is limping along and see if I can turn it into something better. And the other thing is real estate is kind of passive, right? You buy it and you find tenants and you sign multi-year leases and that kind of thing. And there's not a whole lot of work to do in the interim. And so there was a part of me that was kind of going, I'm a creative person. I have a lot of energy. I needed something else to kind of feed all of that. And so creating the executive suites fed that, right? And buying the grocery store and turning it into something else solve that as well. Area 254 is really the first thing that I've created that wasn't in response to solving some other problem. It was purely something where I wanted to do something fun and learned about this whole industry and got into it and said, yeah, that looks like it will solve my need to be creative. It will be fun. It should be profitable if we do it well, and so on. So it's the first one though that I didn't create to solve a real estate problem. I went out and decided that this is a thing.
So how was that different for you? Was there some nerves there? Was there some unknown anxiety or just let's go?
Yeah, it was more or less let go, but even that started actually the city of Bryan, somebody gave them a golf course, right? But they had to turn it into a park. And I happened to know the manager and the mayor and they were showing me the plan for this park. And they were going to build baseball fields and things like that. And I know you love baseball, but I was like, baseball, we have plenty of baseball fields, right? It's something fun that we don't have. And they said, well, what do you think? And I said, well, the go-kart track. They said, well, why don't you do it? So, all right, fine, I will. So I hired Jerry Marola from who does foundations, university, and so on, and he convinced me. I, by the way, was very satisfied with the idea that there would be two go kart tracks, a kart barn, maybe a little snack bar, and let's just race. Right? Just love to race, want to drive fast, and that was it. Jerry's the one who's like, well, but you got to think about dwell time and you should really add an arcade because they're very profitable and your food should be really good, not just a couple of hot dogs on a roller or whatever. And you should add bowling. And I was like, what? I don't want to do any of that. I just want to race, right? But he educated me and I went, oh dang, he's right. All right. So the project expanded. And ultimately the city decided though that they didn't want to have a go-kart track in the park. The council decided that. And so, but by then I was kind of hooked on the idea. I was like, this looks like a fun business. It's always evolving. This whole family entertainment thing is always evolving. There's new arcade games, there's new attractions, there's just different things going on. Even bowling. I mean, bowling, I thought you just threw a ball down the lane and that was the end of it. And but I learned about, of course, string pin setters, and then you learn about the things that Brunswick has, like Spark, where it will project onto the lanes, and you could play games like horse on a bowling lane and stuff like that. And I thought, man, this is way cooler than I thought. And of course, Angry Birds is on the bowling lanes as well. And then DFX, doing the big LED screens on the walls. And I thought, man, there is so much more to this than I understood. And so anyway, by then I was hooked, and I was like, all right, I'm doing that because I can. This will be something I'll do because I really just want to do something cool.
So in terms of the way in which you started each of these three businesses, I mean, obviously you've been doing the real estate game since you were 19, really started learning about it and making that a priority for yourself at 17.
Mhm.
Um, and then you evolved into through the real estate industry, kind of, okay, this is a problem, I'm going to fix it. And now you own a health food store.
Right.
This is the first, this is just you. You really wanted to do this.
Mhm.
Does that change how you divide your time amongst the businesses or the one that, oh, I want to spend more time on Area 254 because that's my baby and that's the fun one?
Yeah, it does for a couple of reasons though. One, that actually seems like an obvious approach to it and conclusion to gain from it. But there's also the reality that I've been in the real estate business so much longer, and it does have the ability to be a little bit on autopilot. But then things come up. Today I had a tenant who wanted a fire escape plan from their space on the fourth floor of a building through the other floors into the first floor, right? And so I got them some maps and sent them over to them and so on. So things come up. I had a tenant who sent me something the other day where they thought they had a roof leak, but really they just needed to change out their air conditioning filters in a replus space. And so, but those things come up. People text you, and you deal with that. And so those will take up a certain amount of your time. Now, Area 254 does take up the majority of my business working time, but in part because doing a business is like launching a rocket, right? It's like all that energy, all that thrust it takes to get it up in the air and get it launched. And then once you get out into the atmosphere or whatever, it starts to be able to roll forward of its own momentum and its own inertia and so on without additional fuel. The natural foods and pharmacy business are like that. I've got a terrific pharmacist. We've worked together since he was a very young person. Created a plan for him to go all the way through pharmacy school, come out the other side, and become the pharmacist in charge, which is that's the term for the boss in that industry. Then that person who I hired for the natural food side of the business still works for me all these years later. It's been 17, 18 years since we started that. And so I've delegated almost to the point of abdication to them. And 254 is something that it'll take a little longer to get there with that. I do have a partner in Area 254 though, which is also a different experience for me. And so and it's nice because he and I have talked, and it's like I would have created one thing if I were doing Area 254 all on my own. He would have created something, but between us, we feel like that what we have created is way better than what either one of us would have done on our own. And so that's very gratifying too, to have been able to play off of one another all along the way, and debate what attractions and decide on the colors and all of those kinds of things.
And something that you have mentioned a few times with each of your businesses and different situations you've been in is something that I think sometimes entrepreneurs don't do, or maybe the don't do as well, which is you sought out people that know more than you.
Mhm. Yeah, you have to. You have to. My family would tell you that I'm very cocky and those things
No.
like and I am, and I kind of enjoy being that for them and around my friends and things like that. But when it's just me at my desk, it's a different animal, and I really do realize that I am not the one with the answers, and I need to find the people who do have the answers. And so I hope that the people who work for me would tell you I do a good job of listening to them and letting them come up with answers as well. That was something I learned when I was running Sam's Clubs, because the culture there was kind of like that people would line up to talk to me all day long, and it was almost like, "Hey, I've got this bomb for you. Here you go." And then they walk away, right? And I'd be like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, wait a minute. You've identified the problem. What's the solution?" And they're like, "I don't know." I'm like, "Well, 300 people can't be counting on me to do all the thinking. So you've identified the problem. What do you think the solution will be? Let's try what you think first and see how it goes. If I need to really dig into it, I'm okay with that. But you should have some idea of what the solution is, right?" And so I have gotten pretty good about that over the years of realizing that I cannot think for everybody. If I try and do all the thinking that's going to happen in the building and come up with all the ideas, the business will fail for sure, because I just can't come up with that many executable ideas
Mhm.
all day long.
Well, and there is something empowering, and I've watched you do it firsthand, how you empower people that you work with and people on your team, and that allowing them that they understand that they have the ability to do it. You always ask first, "What do you think?" Or, "I don't know, how would you solve it?" Or, "What do you think we should do about that?" Right? And that is your go-to in any situation where there's either a conflict or a obstacle or roadblock. And that absolutely is an empowerment for those employees and for those team members
Yeah.
that it doesn't take long before then they come to you and say, this is a problem. Here's how I think we should solve it.
Yeah, yeah, and I appreciate you observing that. I have some who will just tell me, "Hey, there was this problem, and I solved it," and I'm even better with that. You
Right?
know? I'm like, great. I don't have to think about it at all. You found the problem, you found the solution, you executed. Thank you for the update. That's the best case scenario. Um, and I find that the business works better, of course, when it works that way too. I'm kind of loving that at Area 254 we have a Discord that the teams use for various things. And what I'm noticing is that between the managers and the leads, that throughout the day somebody will identify a problem and somebody else will either give them the solution or go, "Oh, that's my bad. I'll fix that later tonight," or whatever the case may be. But I love it when people will take responsibility for whatever went wrong. And I'm seeing that in our group, which I love. It's not is People aren't going, "Oh, well, that was him, he screwed that up," or whatever. They really are working together very, very well. Um and that makes the whole thing so much easier to run, and it just makes it a much better business because they're solving problems without everything having to go up to the boss or bosses and then come back down. They're going peer to peer solving problems, and we're only asked to be engaged in things that we can actually help them with. There's a lot of things that they know way better than I do anyway, so there's no point in me trying to come up with the solution when they know how things work.
And Jim, that's a culture that
Mhm.
doesn't happen by accident.
Right.
That is a
Right.
culture
It is
that doesn't
deliberate.
just, I got lucky and these people are all this way, right? So, what do you do to foster that and grow that? In addition to what we
Well,
just talked about knowing that you're
one
empowering.
thing, yeah, for one thing, I've told a lot of people about the job fair process that we did together,
Mhm.
because that was incredible. When we were getting ready to open Area 254, I had talked to people in the industry, and they were telling me, "Oh, you're going to need 150 people, and so you better hire 300 people," and all of this. And my partner and I were working on schedules, so we're like, we do not see how we can possibly need 150 people. And it's he has some experience in the business. I don't have experience in this business, but I have run Costco's, and I have run Sam's Club, and I have run my own businesses, and so I have a sense of what a person can do within a certain environment and how many people it takes to do that. And I just was not coming up with those kinds of numbers. And so as you may recall, we only ended up hiring 65 people,
Mhm.
and we did it through that job fair process. And it was amazing because when we had people sign up for the job fair, I think we had 420 people, if I remember right.
Yep.
And then we brought them in and we did the interviews, and we invited back maybe like 200 or something like that to
Yeah, I think
the
it was about 220 or something
yeah,
like that.
to the
Yeah, for the
auditions,
auditions.
180, 200, something like that. And you led us through that process, and it was fantastic. Most of those, in the end, we wanted to hire 65 people. I think we went through our list and we got the first 65 or 65 out of 67 people on our list in terms of the order that we gave them. And one of them we didn't get because they gave us bad information and we couldn't even get a hold of them on the second go around. And I don't remember what happened with the other, but anyway, we basically got everybody we wanted, right? And so we hired those people, and some of them we brought in for additional interviewing to just be sure that we wanted to put them into key roles like HR and a manager and our lead positions, some of those kinds of things. And everybody else we hired. And like I said, the majority of those people, certainly the key positions, are still people from that process, from that very first round of hiring. And the great thing about that process that you at Traintertainment have set up is it gave us a chance to see how people work with one another, to find out who are the people who will just sit back and do nothing, who are the people who will engage, who are the people who demonstrate some natural leadership, and who are the people who think they're leaders but they're really just loud.
Bullies. Yeah.
Yeah, or bullies or whatever. But we got to see all of those things and make good hiring decisions, and thankfully we did, and that has worked out really, really well. So for anybody, especially somebody who's starting a new FEC, I tell them, you've got to do this. But even if you have one that's been open for a while and you need to hire several people, I would say that's the way to go.
Oh, well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. And it is such a fun process, but you're exactly right. It's that you start the culture from the first interaction you have.
Mhm.
And that is often an interview. And then, as you mentioned, we did the auditions as well that really create something special. But
Right,
then if you don't foster it and it stops after that process and okay, you've got the job and that's it
right.
ain't gonna last.
Yeah,
So
that's true. And
yeah,
that's part of also that whole analogy I had about when you launch a rocket, right? All of that energy it takes. I mean, it took a lot of energy to get that off the ground because there were so many decisions that you have to make. I mean, it is everything from little things like your color scheme to your logo and whatever, but then hiring decisions and training decisions and follow-up decisions and signage. And I mean, you could go on and on and on. And it's just somebody has to make those decisions. And if it's your business, that's you. You've got to do it.
yeah, yeah. And it is something that truly with working with Area 254, I saw that and I saw the culture that you were building, you and Chris put together and that people embraced it and embraced each other. So I think, another part about certainly if you've got multiple businesses, you can't do it all.
Right. Yeah, and even if you don't, you can't, and even if you think you could, you shouldn't. You know, you've got to be able to relay things out. You got to get other people to a point where they can not only solve problems that you've brought to them, but also identify problems and solve them themselves, even without bringing them to you. Or else you'll get so bogged down that you'll just never be able to make good decisions and never be able to enjoy it either.
Right. Right. Something else that you brought up that I wanted to circle back to is you are not afraid to fail.
No.
You will make a decision and you said it beautifully. A decision needs to be made more, right? We know more is lost by indecision than the wrong decision, right? And you will make a decision. If it needs tweaking, you tweak it. If it's, yep, that was the wrong thing, let's start over and reverse that and go in this direction instead. You're not afraid to do that. Is that something that you learned on those BMX trails as a kid, or where does that come from?
Actually, yeah, it actually is. I can tell you where I believe that came from is um, every once in a while it would occur to me that I hadn't crashed in a long time, right? And of course, your goal is to go around the track as fast as you possibly can and beat all the other guys, right? And but after a while, if you go, huh, I haven't crashed in a while, then it forces you to kind of go, well, am I learning? Am I getting any better? Or am I just going around the track over and over again? It's kind of like the guy who I asked about, did you do 1 year 8 times? You can do that in any area of life that you want, right? And so in the BMX track, it caused me to think, okay, well, let me choose a section of my practice track and maybe I can pedal into a turn a half a pedal further, or maybe I can pedal out a little sooner than I intended to. And so that would be a thing I would work on until I either would figure out a way to do it faster or get thrown off my bike and rethink and say, okay, am I just reached the limit of my skill, or was this a bad idea in the first place? Do I just need to get a little better in order to do this, or do I need to take a different line? But you keep on working on it until you figure out what that is. And or it might be that there's a series of jumps and it might be faster to wheelie. If you think about jumps, I don't know what you would know about BMX jumps or motocross jumps or anything like that, but if you wheelie before you hit one and your front end goes down, your back end goes up, and you kind of sail across the sky as opposed to up, right? And so since you're trying to get from here to there, that is faster, right? To wheelie before it, and don't let your bike jump way up in the air. You want to jump forward. So you would think about those kinds of things and say, okay, can I do that on the bigger jumps, not just the smaller jumps and things like that. So there's a million things that you can work on to improve. And business and life are the same way. And so if you kind of approach it that way and say, okay, well, I'm going to have to, I need to try something to see if I can make this business grow, or make this business better, or make this process smoother, or whatever it is. So you try something, and if it works, fantastic. You learned a new way to improve your process. If it doesn't work, that's okay. Then you tweak it and say, okay, well, what went wrong? Did we get close? I mean, is there an idea we can get from this, or do we scrap it and start again? And either way, it's okay. To me, that's part of the fun of it all, and also part of the fun of being the entrepreneur. To a point you made earlier, I don't remember if we were on camera yet or not, but um, one of the values of being the boss is you can kind of do whatever you want, right? And so you choose how you spend your day. There's some disadvantages before everybody goes, oh well, one of the disadvantages is that the work still has to be done. And so you may decide I'm not doing it today at 10 o'clock because I want to go see my kids do whatever, and that's cool. But at 10 p.m., that work's still going to be there, and you might still be the one who has to do it. And so it's a give and take. But I've always thought if I'm in charge, at least I have some say in how I get to spend my day and what I work on, and so on. So it suits me pretty well.
So Jim, we're coming to the close of our time. I have taken so much from this conversation, and I know our listeners are as well. If you could give a piece of advice to someone thinking about starting a business, what is it?
I would say it probably will take you twice as long as you expect before it will kind of have its own flow. It'll probably cost you twice as much to start as you thought. And so I don't say those things to discourage you, because it in the end it still is very much worth it. It's just I think a lot of people kind of overestimate how quickly all of these things, or maybe underestimate, I guess, how quickly they can get all of these things done. It takes longer usually, and it takes more money usually. But if you do it, and if you get there, it should turn out great. But the real advice is do something, right? Don't look back. And I've heard people talk about when you're 80 years old, are you going to have a lot of memories or a lot of regrets? And I would rather have the memories, right? I'd rather say, okay, even though I did some things that didn't work, at least I don't have a whole bunch of regrets, because I wanted to try this, but I never did. I wanted to do that, but I never did. I wanted to go there, but I never did. I would rather have all of those experiences, and life affords you that opportunity, especially living here in America. I mean, we won the lottery just by being born here. And so take advantage of that opportunity, and live your life.
Oh, that's a perfect way to end it, Jim. Thank you so much for imparting your wisdom to us today, and it's always great to pick your brain. I love to hear your take on things, and see your success and continue to cheer on your success. So thank you for your time today, Jim.
My pleasure. It's always fun to talk to you, Denise.
Well, we hope today's conversation has given you some practical tools to help you sharpen your edge and accelerate your growth. If you're ready to grow your team, your business, or yourself, contact us at thegrowthprogroup.com and set up a free growth call with one of our coaches. Once again, a special thanks to our sponsors, Embed, Party Center Software, EMA Global, Betson, Simnox, Schaefer, and Roller, for all that they do to help us bring you the Growth Pro Edge. And until next time, I'm Denise Killian with the Growth Pro Group. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep striving for the extraordinary.
Mm. Mm.